So I'm Director of Safety Research, and that's safety research and best practices. So in Waymo, Waymo, we have these 3 vehicles coming online. My passion, and I've been working within industry for my entire career. I've been doing scientific research and publishing papers within mostly Volvo, different Volvos. And I have a strong belief in science and how science can help us solve these problems. So that is, you can definitely see that in the papers that we've been writing. I'm also one of the 5 people that approve and assess a major software update. So we do. I'll talk about the governance of how we work with software, but I'm one of the people that does look at every report that's made about our software. So I dream about us solving this problem. So we're all in agreement that we can expand and use the promise of self-driving cars in the best way to solve this problem. We've done 48 papers, and we've done them to document the way we think and enhance our transparency and understanding. We get a lot of positive reactions from the general public, as well as from particularly standards organizations and regulators. The regulators are really reading our papers as well. So that's always encouraging. So I'll start, though, with just this one slide. There's normally many slides you can have about introducing what Waymo is, but I'll just use this one. And the reason I'm showing this is because it's showing that we're in a new phase. We're in a phase of expansion. So we're currently operating in 5, or sorry, this one, the blue is the 5 cities that we're operating in. And we're expanding to some cities that have been announced. We've also announced Tokyo, and there's some others that are coming online. So you'll see that that's really where we are in our phase in the company. And then I wanted to show this video to give you a feeling, but I'm not sure how well it's showing up here because it's jumping around. But if you go to Dmitry Dolgov's Twitter account, or you go to Waymo Twitter account, then you'll find all these videos. There's many kinds of videos where we're interacting with like dangerous situations where people run out from behind this hidden exit and all these kinds of interesting videos. And they're continually coming out. Yesterday I saw this really interesting interaction with a cat. And today, Dmitry, I think, shared a video where the Waymo is really turning its wheel at 280 degrees to avoid a car that's backing out, for example. So these are coming in all the time. How many of you have taken a ride in a Waymo lately? Have you planned that? You should be planning a trip to one of these beautiful cities to take a ride. It's an important experience because there's only one chance in your life you get to have that 5-minute period of time it takes before you're back on your phone. It's exciting, but then you're back on your phone. But so in the early days of deployment, there was some novelty and were visually distinctive. You can really see a Waymo. And then therefore, there's been an exceptional amount of interest in Waymo. I've been working on ADAS technology my entire career. And there have been a lot of discussions about electronic stability control, or AEB, but never in the same way that it's been engaging the general public. So to show this video,
our first ever Waymo.
And what does it mean when we're in a Waymo?
It means that there is nobody
driving this thing! And this is a fully autonomous Waymo ride. I cannot believe this. The car did a better job than if somebody was driving.
The truck was over the yellow line, so the Waymo braked and moved to the side.
It knew how to pronounce my name.
Oh my God. Look at this thing.
Oh, it's nice. I love it. This is look.
This is so cool.
I'll never forget this. Never.
Well, that's a bit of energy there for you. I think there's a very serious issue here at hand, of course, that it's a public health crisis. This has been described as a public health crisis. I think the one statistic that really gets me is that WHO sees that the leading cause of death, of all causes of death, for ages 5 to 29 is traffic accidents. And I'm not sure you realize that's what we're working with here. And 108 countries have seen development and improvement on crash rates a lot, and that's thanks to Vision Zero. The United States is lagging behind on its adoption of Vision Zero, but that's coming. So our mission is to reduce injuries and fatalities by driving safely and responsibly and manage risk as we scale. So I wanted to talk about the core of safety, and this is where we get into the interesting stuff here about what is safety. This is a recent paper, and I've been talking a lot with Klaus Tingvall and Anders Lee and about Vision Zero, and it all boils down to one thing. It's one thing. If you're talking about seriously injured and fatalities, it's these thresholds. So it's like an invisible threshold that you need to keep under. And these are impact speeds. These are defined by biomechanics, what we tolerate in our bodies. And it's different from different angles, different masses, etc. But it's kinetic energy. This is like the simplest expression that you can have for safety. And of course, it gets more complicated when you involve the injury risk curves. But I thought it was really actually useful to think of it as a threshold, a high severity threshold, and that's what people are actually doing. They're focusing on fatalities and seriously injured, and that's what Vision Zero actually is. So Vision Zero and the safe system. Waymo is committed to Vision Zero, and the thinking, and this is all came from Sweden. So it's proud to be here in Sweden with this, but this is the most effective solution for this traffic safety problem. And it's worth thinking about why. This is a very non-traditional approach. So if you've asked for non-traditional approaches, this is the most non-traditional approach. The insight that was needed to have Vision Zero. So, their road, the adoption of Vision Zero was fraught with misconception. There are many misconceptions. One of the misconceptions is that it's every collision or it's every injury. It's not. It's seriously injured and fatalities. It's a subset. And I think that, they've had their struggles. That is an ongoing struggle. It's hugely effective. And one of the main insights is prioritizing seriously injured and fatalities over the rest. And if you think of this as a distribution where you can spend your time over here, you can be very busy looking at this stuff. But the insight comes from working with that and developing principles with that section. It's a principled approach. And they actually accept low severity in favor of a principled approach based on high kinetic energy control. So the design of the 2+1 road, I don't know if you've been here in Sweden with the barrier that goes back and forth, that eliminates fatalities and increases low severe crashes. Or roundabouts with the same thing. Would that have been accepted? That you increase low severe crashes to eliminate fatalities and seriously injured. How would you get there? How would you get the acceptance for that unless you have some really good work and principles behind the whole thing. So the success came from breaking the causal connection between low and high severe crashes. And right now what we're seeing is low severe crashes are being used as equivalent of high severe crashes. And it's not. So this dissociated relationship is really, really important for working with low data things. And we need to actually be responsible by prioritizing those things as well. So this all has its roots in injury prevention and crashworthiness research, etc. And those people are not in this room. I'm guessing that there's almost no one that has a crashworthiness background. They were the ones, there was 80% of them in my time at Volvo. Now they're all gone. These are people that have 70 years of research experience. They're not present in the discussions. And I miss them because there's a lot of epidemiological experience, epidemiologists. It's a complex topic. So AVs themselves, so we've had this statistic here. We're reducing seriously injured or worse. I'll get back to that, but that's a positive result that we're seeing. So this is the part where I was saying there's a traditional approach that is still quite dominant in many places, but they've broken with that. And there is a new approach, the Vision Zero approach. One of the things we've been doing is looking at how AVs are uniquely capable for strengthening each of the pillars. There's pillars in the safe systems approach. And one of the main things I talked about is speed limit, or speed. Speed is very tightly related to that kinetic energy topic. So AVs can address the primary sources of human error that the safe system wants to mitigate. Safe speeds. This is we put out some papers recently, and we've used an analysis of the relationship between speed and outcomes, and found this is a high-level thing. But I'd like to get you to read the papers on the topic. But speed limit compliance could save 82 lives per year in Phoenix and San Francisco only. And if you think about, we've now driven 100 million miles at the speed limit, and that is an effect itself. It's a really sought-after effect from Vision Zero. And then safe vehicles. I think it's really interesting to know that. Well, we put this in as 100%. If you had 100%, what would the effect be? And we have a very high seatbelt use. That's an unusual thing. If you compare with some taxis have like 40% use in the back seat with seatbelt. These are very, very basic things, but it's extremely important. And one of the other things that we have, you saw those three vehicles there. They're all top-rated safety crashworthiness vehicles. So now you have a uniformity of the fleet being 5-star vehicles. That uniformity is important for an effect on the system. So today, I think we have a focus here. And I think this is really, hopefully, we'll have some discussion. And we're trying to get new ideas to move from static to dynamic safety strategies. And we want safety done right. We really do. It's important for us that the evaluation is recognized as valid. We developed what I think is described as a self-correcting system. It's a quick correction when we improve things faster because we have an incredible ability to log the data and then inspect events and fix things. This is a highly dynamic. It's completely different than working at an OEM, for example. But there is some misunderstandings in public discourse. I think we have a really good relationship with the reviewers on our papers. And I know you're out there, people that are really highly qualified, and really have appreciated those discussions, and also with regulators and standards committees. It's been incredible, great discussions, but the public discourse is different. The public discourse often is by people that haven't taken a ride, and they tend to be skeptical. And there's a skepticism where there's loud voices and propagate fallacies or inaccuracies. So today, what I'd like us to do is try to go for, this is what I'm dreaming of, is that we could have a technically detailed discussion that's balanced. I recognize that there's overhype, but I also recognize that there's overly negative sides of this. So this is where we need to be adults and talk about the details. So what we have, this is what I'm here to do, is to present this. There's three things. What we have is a retrospective analysis that's after deployment. You're looking at the crash outcomes, looking at how did we do? What is our crash involvement? How you need to develop the epidemiological science behind that to be able to detect a difference. And then you have a prediction of that. So we have 12 methodologies, and this is complicated. We have a complicated talk today. But it's important that the methodologies behind this are discussed, as well as each of these 12 different methodologies that we use to predict and approve an outcome. But without this safety case that's around it, then you don't have the justification, all of the things you need for regulation and submission of your safety case. So I'm going to cover all three of these today. So we'll go first to after deployment. And what we have is an assessment of architecture, behavior, and operations that's done. You have an approval, that's a deployment readiness review. And then now you're looking at how we're doing in the field over time accumulated. So we're very unique in that we publish our data. You can download our data. Maybe I don't know if you have or not, but there are CSV files for all the data we publish on our website. Most of it is equivalent to the SGO data, but there's some extra data there as well. And we do this regularly. We're due for a new update. You know that we've passed 100 million miles a little while ago, and then we're due for a new update. But so we're showing a reduction in serious injuries or worse category, airbags, injuries. These are the main categories. But then if you look at this breakdown, this is a new breakdown that came with a paper we published in the spring. So you're now able to see fewer pedestrians, cyclists, motorcyclists. So the question is, do you trust this data? What would it take for you to trust the data? We're publishing papers in peer-reviewed journals. We have CSV files. We're encouraging people to download. We're working with standards groups to standardize how to do this retrospective assessment. There's an ISO that started. We have a consensus paper called RAVE on this topic because it is extremely important to us that this is done fairly. We also are advocating for vehicle miles traveled or exposure data to be submitted with the SGO data so you can get rates. And I believe that this is the most central thing. How do we know what the performance is if we can't agree on how to measure it? So one of the things I thought was like incredible, this is all on the same page, by the way, was the effect on intersections. I thought that was going to be like, oh my God, look at that. That's amazing. Intersection reduction. But even though that's like, it is a huge effect, most people are interested in the VRU data. So the VRU data the pedestrians, the cyclists, and the motorcyclists, that's the one that most people have been naturally attracted to. But there are incredible effects. And then, so the one thing that most people I don't think really understand. Okay, the blue is the residual. Blue is the collisions that are left over. Those collisions, the blue collisions, they're any involvement collisions. So any involvement, if we're standing still, someone hits us, it's included. It's included because it's in the baseline. You have to have the same thing on both sides. So it doesn't say anything about causality. Who caused the crash? So if you think of the residual as the blue, and now you have a different lens, which you're trying to say, well, how can we approach causality? Who is causing crashes? Well, there's a very established method, third-party claims that insurance companies do. That's this. So if you say the residual, the blue, and then of the blue, how much of the blue it has Waymo responsibility with it, contributing to the collision. That's what this analysis is. And you find that we have an exceptionally small causality or contribution to these collisions. And you can read the narratives, encourage everyone to do that. So, but we're also in the business of talking about misconceptions, and a lot of it was those epidemiologists that are missing in the conversation that I was talking about before. So there's some super simple things and super simple mistakes that people are making. One of them I think is kind of interesting is that this is like comparing miles per hour with kilometers per hour. They're different units. And that's a mistake that's common, that people are using different units when they're comparing baseline and collisions. There's a huge underreporting in human crash data. And you find less underreporting as you get more severe crashes. What counts as a crash is a really good discussion. Is it any scratch or dent? We've looked at the SGO data. There's around 48% is below 1 mile per hour delta V, which are very, very mild crashes. But if you want, you could count those as meaning as much as a serious injury. If you're trying to distort the way you look at the collisions. So there's ODD matching. ODD is operational design domain. You have to be at the level where you're comparing apples to apples on where you're driving. But there are some other recent misconceptions that have been proposed or used. And one is that you need to have fatalities. You need to have hundreds of millions of miles. Therefore, you cannot make any conclusions about your data until you have fatalities. So this is a statistical power misconception. You look at this, there's these different categories here. And fatal is still, you need the data to get to the fatal collision. And to say that you're statistically reducing fatal crashes. But where we are right now is that we are significant on all the other types. So that the latest peer-reviewed research that we showed was that we are reducing serious injury or worse crashes. And this is about the size of the effect that you have. We have a huge effect size, so it's power, statistical power. So then there's other part of that, which is Waymo's only driving 100 million versus 3 trillion miles a year in the US. That means that they're not credible. So the thing is, we're only driving in those 5 cities I was talking about. So we've been saying consistently, and the rave methodology says you need to compare with the ODD. What's relevant is the mileage in where we're driving. What we're comparing to is the mileage where we're driving. This is, for example, we're 1.5% of the VMT in San Francisco. But that's where you compare. You compare the crash rates, benchmarks in San Francisco, because that's where you're driving. So then the other bit to that is that would it change if it was from trillions down to millions? And there's no discernible difference because of the way statistics work, that you need a baseline at 1 million before it fails to find the difference. So this is all basic statistics.
So I can ask a question. So these numbers are probably from the US, right? So if you have like a Waymo driving in like a Sweden, where there is more sort of education to the new drivers and so on, better like good, I don't know if it's better road designs. How would you?
Yeah.
The numbers
Can I answer that question later?
Sure.
But I get that question, and it is an important question. I just have so many other things I need to say. So there's one other. The third one is the limited ODD, and I realize I must speed up a little bit here, but we are following the best practices for matching benchmarks on the ODD as well. We also are doing almost all weather types in our ODD, so I don't think that's a relevant criticism. And then this is, I guess, the big one, that machine learning models, that they have special concerns, that that things that cause accidents are so rare and unlikely and not represented in training data set, that the brittle machine learning models will make some mistake, and this is going to be an unknown risk. But that's precisely why we developed these 12 methodologies. All of these 12 methodologies was precisely for this purpose. And this is the segue into the third part of my talk. So this method has been developed for that. And for us to be able to talk about these 12 methodologies, we wrote a paper about this recently. And we'd love to talk about that. But you're seeing the difficulties with misunderstandings that we're getting with the most simplest thing, which is epidemiological research. And now think that now you're going to move into a new area where we've developed novel methods. And now we need to talk about that. So this is part of the phase that we're in. We need to work to get these misunderstandings cleared up. So I'm moving into the other portion now. So to talk about the 12 different methodologies we use before approval. So there's a development phase and an evaluation phase of a candidate configuration. So we look at these 12 methodologies, and some of these you'll recognize. System safety, V&V, cybersecurity are quite well known. There's a strong interest for scenario-based testing, and that's what we call collision avoidance testing. At Whimo, we wrote a paper about that. Went into quite a lot of detail on that, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. We also do predicted collision risk, which is prediction of what the rates would be for collision in this particular candidate. And that's defined in the ISO number. Is it 5083 and some annex in that? So that's defined. And then we have rules of the road compliance methodology, how we're meeting the traffic laws. Heated progress has to do with how we're disrupting traffic and comparing that to human performance or other requirements on stop in traffic. VRU is to deep dive into VRU data. It's a special lens put on that. We also have a special lens on high severity assessment. So complementary tests for the high severe crashes. And you can do that in many different ways. One of the ways you can do that is through scenario-based testing, but there are other ways you can also do that. Conservative severity estimate looks at root causes of bugs that we find to try to see the worst case outcome of those bugs. Risk management is the risk management where things fall through the cracks. Something is identified and you put a time limit on the fix for that. And there's a lot of other field safety issues that pop up that could be anything from operations to any type of field safety. So that's all described in this paper, in this table. There's I'll refer you to that. But let's take us a moment to talk a little bit about collision avoidance testing. I think when I've been in the EU discussions that seems like there's a lot of more focus or that you can devise scenarios for every type of collision type you're going to be encountering. And we've been doing that for many years, but we're finding you need to use complementary methods as well for that. And then the fact that we're driving so much means that we're encountering things we've never seen before, scenarios that haven't been seen before. And those scenarios are then used as seed scenarios. So there's a feedback that goes back into the scenario and you do fuzzing or variations around that. But one of the other things that's really central to this is what we've called the neon driver model, non-impaired eyes-on conflict driver model. We've developed very sophisticated modeling approaches for this. So we have 12 papers that have been written about the modeling, which is based off of human data and fitting human or models to human data. There's a whole subfield of research and a conference on that, and we have a lot of effort towards that. But in this case, you see here the comparison. This is our vehicle, and it's compared to 6 versions of these are 3 reaction times: 1, 2, 3, and then they swerve either direction, as well as just brake. So it has 3 chances as well with regard to steering. All right, and then, so one of the other things I want to talk about is that in the UNECE, there's the UNECE regulations that are almost finished. There's an idea about careful and competent driving, or the concept about careful and competent driving. I think that's closely related, but not identical to the neon driver that I just showed, which is a computational version. It's a computational model of that. But there are other parts to it. There's expectations that you can set on a careful and competent that are not modeled as quantitative as you can with reaction time, for example. Like what the proper thing to do in this situation would be. But this, I think, has been this is the drivership paper that we did. And I think this is actually really useful to talk, or frame the discussions, because what we're seeing is there's sometimes a double standard that's put up for AVs. And I think that it's really interesting to think, are we comparing against careful and competent, which is a concept? You're careful and competent, and then if you're dangerous or impaired, you're severely different than that standard. You're quite different, and you're all great drivers, I'm sure. So but your frequency of meeting the standard is probably not perfect. And some of you would admit that. But if you think of it as you have some lapses of meeting the standard. And if you think of an AV, what you get with an AV is more consistency in meeting the standard. But this still is normative expectations. And it's important to define what normative is compared to empirical. And speed is the easiest example of that. You have a speed limit, but you have what everybody's driving. And this is an important to differentiate that, what you're talking about. But then you also have furtherance expectations. Some roads are designed poorly. Maybe you should be driving at different speed, or you should be doing different behaviors, or you could be putting expectations on an AV that you don't put on ADAS systems or a human. So getting back to the safety case then, as the last bit in my talk, it's the justification of and the documentation of the inner bits there. I just find where I am here. So this again is important in UNEC regulations. A safety case is what will be used within that, and you'll see a system description, the safety concept, including all the system to manage the risks. And then you'll have a full body of claims, arguments, and evidence for simulator, track, and real world. And you'll have a safety management system. A robust safety culture is the intent there, and also a process for managing tools and safety in environments. So it's making its way into regulation. And we've done a number of papers on this topic. Most recently, this one on how to grade evidence. So this is a busy slide. There's a number of papers on the topic, if this is something you're specifically interested in. But it's interesting to reflect upon how did we get here? How we got here was through the development of standards, work with standards. I know that many of you are involved with that yourselves. So we've been highly active in the establishment of best practices. Like I mentioned, that RAVE standard of retrospective safety impact assessment. So we're very active there. We've been very exceptionally active with the first responder program, meeting industry standards, where you're educating police and firefighters, etc. And we received an independent safety confirmation from Chief Sud on that. And then there are many other developments that are ongoing, and it's very close to becoming approved for international use, the UNECE standard. We also have governance. This is also another busy slide, but I can quickly describe it. We have methodology owners, so a system safety methodology owner, for example, would write a report. Or if it's on V&V, you get the report that's written, and it goes to the Safety Framework Steering Committee, or I'm one of these people here. We read, assess the methodologies, and those are then approved by the safety board. There's a release, and that's managed in the field safety, incident management, and monitoring of the service. We also have guidelines, approval guidelines for the acceptance criteria. All right. Here's the flash of our website where we have our papers. And with that, I'd like to open up for questions. Oh, actually, I have one last slide. I didn't realize that. So the wrap up was that we've developed a comprehensive set of safety methodologies that we're in the process of discussing and working with everyone to understand that. And I believe what we need now is a very crystal clear definition and understanding of safety, because it's a public health crisis. It's a well-defined public health crisis. That's what we should be targeting. So we need to work with these barriers to understanding, and we are on the team of getting safety done right. When we get past these misunderstandings and expand and accelerate adaptation, so we can have the most impact on status quo. So that's my last slide. Now we don't have for questions.